let's check this. Get something a little more interesting than just me. I'll move off to the no, move off to the side this way, I bet. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction. My name is Liam Ragan. I work for BC Nature as the coordinator for key biodiversity areas and important bird areas. And I'm going to be talking to you today about key biodiversity areas in your area and the program as a whole, with the hope that folks here get excited to continue to participate the way many of your member clubs or member of your club members have in the past. Let me make sure you all can see my slides and not all my notes.
Yeah. Well, we
Terrific.
just did slides, which
Sounds
is
good. I
good.
made that mistake a couple presentations ago, and everyone got to see what I was writing about their club. So I always got to check. Yeah, so we'll talk a bit about important bird areas, key biodiversity areas, and then I've selected a few KBAs from the Fraser Valley that I think you might find interesting. Had I known you had a phantom orchid talk coming up, I would have focused on one of them. We're looking at nominating a site specifically for phantom orchid, and as someone who has tried many times to see them here on Vancouver Island, I'm quite jealous, but happy to hear. So I always
We
have to
send
start
you
with,
a photo.
pardon me.
We send you a photo.
Sounds good. Hey, if you guys are going out, maybe I'll drive through and come join you. Like I said, I've tried quite a few times for them. I'm getting pretty desperate. Anyhow, so I like to start talks about important bird areas of the why. Why do we bother do this? What's the point? And I used to give all these graphs here about, oh, birds are flying all over the place. They're using different areas. Sometimes the males migrate one way, the females migrate another, the juveniles go here and create these big interconnected chains of life. But what I found is as interesting as this is, what is far more of a story is just looking at that happen. So here we have the year-round abundance of Bonaparte skulls. I hope you can all see this okay. What this shows is over the course of the year, how you have multiple populations of Bonaparte skulls moving all throughout North America. Some spend the winter in the Salish Sea, some spend the winter in the Gulf of Mexico, fly through the Mississippi Delta, and all end up somewhere in the boreal to high Arctic to breed or sorry, low Arctic. And I think what this illustrates to me is the fact that if you start with the question of how do we make sure that Bonaparte's skull doesn't go extinct, it can't be a question of what we're doing in the Fraser River estuary. It can't be a question of what we're doing in Haida Gwaii. It can't be a question of what's happening in the Mississippi Delta. It has to be a question of what are we as the North American or with some species global conservation community doing to make sure that this species has a safe place to breed, to migrate through, and to spend the winter, and often many little spots in between those. And as daunting as that is, it is also incredibly exciting. It is the sort of force that compels us to work outside our bubbles, work with other communities, work with everything from Inuit hunters all the way down to ranchers in the Pampas of Argentina, all the way over to wetland conservationists in Tasmania. It's why birds really appeal to me as a sort of global opportunity for these kind of partnerships. In BC, we've actually been a global leader in IBAs. We've had them here now for about 28 years. We're one of the first places in Canada to implement them. And of the 13,000 IBAs that were recognized globally, we have 83 in British Columbia and one in Chilliwack, which I will get to in a sec. So that's the where and the why. The what. What is an IBA? An IBA looks at that global distribution of where birds are going throughout their life and tries to answer the question of where are the most important sites that this bird needs to do well. And it can be broken down roughly into concentrations of birds and globally threatened birds. Concentrations, there's a whole kind of metric written up about this, but it basically boils down to where can we find reliably 1% of a species population. Anyone here have rough idea how many glaucous-winged gulls there are in the world? Love answering this question because, I mean, even the most skilled ornithologists out there, why would you think about this? How often does this come up? Any guesses?
Millions. 10 million.
Little lower.
5 million. No.
There are only thought to be, as of 2021, about 470,000 glaucous-winged gulls on Earth. And that's, I think, as is demonstrated, a lot lower than a lot of people think. Many species are like this. Black oyster catcher, for example, there's only about 10,000 on Earth, meaning they are very, very susceptible to threats. And so what this means is with 470,000, if you have a site where at least 4,700 are regularly occurring, so whether that's they breed there, whether that's they migrate through there, whether that's where they spend the winter, we say, you know what, we got to draw a boundary around this. We're going to enter it in as an IBA site. We're going to give groups like Nature Chilliwack, like BC Nature, like governments, that sort of direction and extra ammunition to go in and protect this site and say, this isn't just an important island or place we like to hike. This is critically important to glaucous winged gulls, and if we don't want them to go extinct, we need to protect it. Globally threatened species. Anyone know what these are?
Merlins.
Pardon me?
Merlins.
Merlets.
Oh,
Thank
merlins.
So, as you can imagine, how significant a site is to a species that's doing well is very different from how significant a site is to a species that might be plummeting, that's endangered, threatened, critically endangered, what have you. And so, because of that, we are able to drop those thresholds down based on how the bird is doing. So, if it is endangered, it can go down to 0.5%, critically endangered 0.1% of the population. So, with marbled murrelets, with a population of about 260,000 that are listed as endangered by Chilliwack, anywhere we regularly get 260 marbled murrelets, we say, yep, you know what? That's a place we need to pay a bit more attention to. I won't get too into this because I want to spend more time on the KBAs, but we also have the national standards, which is that same thing we just said, except instead of looking at how many marbled murrelets there are globally, we look at the national population and just say this is a nationally significant site for these species. So the WHO, some of you may recognize the people in this photo. This is our caretaker for Chehalis River Estuary, Kathy Stewart, and she is the caretaker for your nearest IBA. And I refer to the caretakers as the eyes and ears on the ground. Like I said, BC and BC Nature have been a leader in IBAs since they came out. We helped designate them originally in the 90s and early 2000s. And when we did that, we went back to the same global partnership of NGOs and governments who originated them in the first place and said, terrific, what's next? And they said, oh, we did it. We have these lines on the map, we have these designations. Huzzah. And we kind of said, you know what, I think we could go a bit farther. Same way, kind of drawing from our experience working with ecological reserve wardens, working with our clubs. We said, let's set up a program so that if we're saying a place is globally critical to sandhill cranes, glaucous winged gulls, long-billed curlews, what have you, that we have someone keeping an eye on that. So that at a bare minimum, if Joe Schmo wants to build an apple orchard in a site that contains 10% of Canada's sage thrasher, they can raise the red flag and say, "Hey, there's something coming down the pipeline here. We got to be careful. Let's rally the troops. Let's get together and let's make sure that whatever development is being proposed here, whether that's a fish farm or a plantation, it takes into account how significant this is to global populations." The biggest allies we've had in that have been the Naturalist Club volunteers. So, as you can imagine, many of these sites, if you want to go out and do a survey to determine, well, how many sandhill cranes are there across 5,000 square kilometers of plains? If we have one caretaker, maybe two, that's an impossible task. If you start looking at bringing in contractors, bringing the government, CWS, it's not impossible, but it's very expensive. And as all of you are unfortunately aware, there is not that much money all the time in conservation, particularly bird conservation. And so the solution to that BC Nature brought forward was clubs, volunteers, people who care, locals who know the sites better than anyone else. Let's put this in the hands of folks who have the expertise to pull this off and who are already passionate about making sure we, at a bare minimum, understand how these populations are doing. So I gave the example of sandhill cranes in Douglas Lake. In that case, we have the Kamloops Naturalist Club and Nicolet Naturalist Society, who together put up somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 volunteers every spring to fan out over this massive grassland and count exactly how many sandhill cranes. And because of that, we know how the sandhill crane migratory population in Canada is changing over the years, whether it's declining, increasing, how they adapt to things like forest fires, droughts, heat waves. And it's been a really key point in our understanding of exactly what's needed to make sure sandhill crane continue to thrive. And last but not least, First Nations. Thank you for the great land acknowledgement when you started here. As you all are aware, one of our best allies in stewardship are the traditional stewards who have worked on these lands and waters since time immemorial. I always joke that depending on which which section of the province you're in, this is a question of, oh yeah, how can we get in here? What's the best way to go count these cranes? All the way to some of the coastal sites we work in, the conversation starts with, okay, we got to go count black oyster catchers. How do me and my team get in here without dying? Because this is a really, really rough patch of sea. And, thank God for locals. And yeah. So with that, I'll give the example of the nearest IBA to you folks. Drum roll, please. I'm sure many of you already know the Chehalis River Estuary. For those who don't know, the Chehalis River estuary empties into the lower Harrison River, just upstream from the junction with the Fraser. It's a broad fan of meandering channels and mudflats, sedge marshes, bordered with black cottonwood, western cedar, Douglas fir, and it is one of the most significant sites in Canada for, anyone want to take a guess? Remember, just talking birds right now.
Bald eagles.
Bald eagles, good. Any others? We got three species.
Swans.
Swans, perfect. I'll give you a hint. We've talked about one of them briefly here.
Gulls.
Gulls. Awesome. So the first species that your club, your area, the Chilliwack and Chehalis River Estuary has preserved, and in this case, very, very critically, has been trumpeter swan. Anyone want to take a wild guess at how many trumpeter swans there are in the world?
20,000.
20,000, somebody said.
Close, close. A little bit higher. The current global population estimate is thought to be about 63,000, although there's 23,000 that breed in Canada. So very interestingly on that, trumpeter swans are kind of one of North America's greatest conservation success stories. For those who don't know, they came precipitously close to going extinct. The estimate in 1935 was that there were only 69 trumpeter swans left in the world, which, I mean, for those of us who now see hundreds in a single field is pretty hard to fathom. That was largely the result of hunting pressure, lead poisoning, so hunters using lead shot that then gets into the ecosystem, collision with power lines, and habitat loss. Similar story to a lot of waterfowl across the continent over the last 100 years. Um, but as you can see on this graph here, as a result of partners like Ducks Unlimited, BC Nature, CWS coming together and restoring wetland, uh, implementing better hunting regulations to make sure we didn't drive this species and many other to extinction, they have made a catastrophic comeback. If people, I like to say, when people start talking about, oh, does conservation work? You can start pointing to birds in their backyard that like that wouldn't exist. If conservation didn't work, say goodbye to peregrine falcon, say goodbye to trumpeter swan, say goodbye to, maybe even bald eagle. Here we are. As you can see here, they really started to rebound in the early 2000s, and that was largely a result of programs like Important Bird Areas that said, hey, this site cannot be allowed to fail. We cannot mess with this wetland. We cannot mess with these farm fields. This is critical to the success of the species, to the point that one of the challenges we've had has been, I say challenges, it's a very lovely challenge to have. Trumpeter swans have rebounded so quickly and in such a massive numbers that whereas before you only needed, well, imagine if there's 69 swans in 1935, you get one swan in a site, you go, oh my God, leave that swan alone. Let it do whatever it needs to do. There's a pair of swans breeding there. Don't go anywhere near them. To the point where now that we're into the, 60,000 or what have you, you need a couple hundred to start to continue to say, hey, this is still important. And it doesn't mean it's less important. It just means that we really need sites with a lot of swans now to have an IBA. The other site, thank you for calling that out, is bald eagle, or sorry, other species. Anyone want to take a crack at bald eagle numbers? I know it's a daunting thing. When I guess at these, I always fail. I try and test myself with species I'm not familiar with. There's about 200,000 bald eagle in the world. And really fascinatingly, you folks have what we think might be the third largest aggregation of bald eagle in the world, behind Squamish and some site in the US I don't know anything about. But yeah, so kind of take heed on that. You're stewarding some pretty cool habitat. And the third one, like I mentioned, is Glaucus wing gull. We know certainly the site is nationally significant to Glaucus wing gull. We're building that into the proposal right now. It's only about 57,000 Glaucus wing gulls in Canada, 470,000, like we said. So you don't need too many, and the numbers that come in on your winter salmon runs are pretty significant. Interesting story about Glaucus wing gull while we're on the subject. They have been declining pretty rapidly, especially in the Salish Sea. And it's been a really kind of unconventional decline in that at the same time as they're declining, public perception of glaucous winged gulls is that there's more than ever. And the reason for that is it seems like as fish stocks decline, as some of their breeding islands in the Salish Sea and beyond fail, they're coming more and more into urban spaces. And so if you're not spending every day going out to those colonies and seeing the decreasing numbers, if not all outright collapses, your experience of glaucous winged gulls can be, oh wow, there's more than ever, right? Like they're all over town now. They're getting into dumpsters, they're nesting on my roof. When really what that might be signaling instead is that this is a first wave of kind of climate refugees, of overfishing refugees coming into our cities because they just can't cut it out in the sea anymore. But very hopefully, CWS is putting a ton of time and resources into figuring this out and turning back the tide, so to speak. Does anyone ever see any banded gulls out your way? I'm always curious where these guys get to. Well, if you do, this is a project that CWS has sponsored. Have put these color bands out on something like, I think they're nearing 1,000 glaucous-wing gulls. And what they're trying to do, excuse me, is figure out how long these birds are living, where they're moving to, where they're foraging, if we have birds coming down from the north, if we have birds are moving around, what's happening. And I'd be really curious if any of you see these. You can go onto the Salish Sea Gull Reporting website or reportbandedbird.org and report that. You'll get a little certificate back saying how old the bird was, where it came from, and if it's a significant find, like often happens, get a little thanks from the program saying like, hey, we really appreciated that one. Because for those of you who don't know, putting bands on a bird, gull, any species pretty cheap. Those bands are maybe a couple bucks at most. Putting a satellite tag out on them, which they do still do, thousands of dollars. And so by relying on communities to report birds flying around, you can get a way, way, way broader breadth of information than if you were to, instead of 1,000 bands, put out two satellite tags. Although they do still put the satellite tags out, and that's also a fun bit they have there. Anyhow, so that's a quick. Oh, I see a hand in the back there.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you ever go to like the Chilliwack dump or anything to try and spot these? There's about 3,000 or so in the winter go to Cultus Lake and hang out in the lake, and it would be there it'd be a little harder to see the bands, but big
Yeah,
numbers in the dump.
that's a really good question. I'm not from Chilliwack. I live on Vancouver Island, so usually when I'm passing through, I'll go bird the Chehalis. I I know dumps are great birding. I end up there more than I wish that I did. Usually when I'm traveling for birding, I try and hit the estuaries and floodplains before the dumps and wastewater treatment plants.
The
Um,
other thing is there's a lot of the caucus is hybridized with the California or
Western,
the Western, yeah, a lot.
yes, they
So
do.
what do you do there?
Yeah, so the CWS program monitoring them, because they're banding most of them in hand, they try and focus on ones that don't have a ton of Western parentage. For those who don't know, gull hybridization is both intimidating and fascinating. They used to be isolated based on where glaciers were distributed, with kind of different species wedged in between different glacial formations. But as those glaciers retreated, the sort of southern population of Western gulls and northern population of glaucous-winged gulls began to move together to recolonize that area from retreating glaciers and hybridize in those zones. So it's not a focus of the program. It's something I find very interesting. It's not something that gets in the way of reporting bands. If you see a band, report it. They'll deal with the hybrid stuff and the further analysis. Because most of these birds, I believe, they have blood samples of, so they can really say exactly their parentage. With regards to the dump bits, here in Victoria, actually, we have the exact same thing. The Victoria dump, the Heartland landfill, has somewhere in the range of 3 to 5,000 glaucous-wing gulls at it. Usually, not a huge fan of that. I've been reaching out to the city to try and figure something out with BC Nature. But I asked them, "Do you ever see banded gulls?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we've never seen a banded gull." And I'm like, "Well, could I come just give it a shot? Because I know there's a lot of banded gulls out there. It'd be surprising if you have that many and there isn't one." And like 10 minutes in, found one right in front of the station. I think really points to where community science can really help this kind of stuff. Another fun anecdote. This actually, I know this gull specifically. It's always hangs out at Clover Point here in Victoria, and 3 out of the last 4 years, I have seen this exact gull eating a piece of octopus within about 20 feet of the same spot at Clover Point for 3 years. So well, one of the cool parts, it's rewarding for you as a naturalist with being able to tell exact birds, is you kind of get to tell their story a bit more, right? Like how often do you know, oh, well, that's glaucous wing gull, orange, blue, orange, my old octopus eating friend. So highly recommend if anyone's interested. Would love, love, love to hear what gulls you guys are getting. And like I said, get this fun little certificate. It's always fun bit to participate. Any other questions on IBAs before we move on to KBAs? Awesome. So IBAs, like I said, came here in the 90s, highly successful. And oops, let me see, there we go. Highly, highly successful. And all these conservation organizations around the world started saying, "Oh, well, this worked so great for birds. Let's do butterfly important areas and amphibian important areas and areas for zero extinction and running with the success of IBAs to try and kind of duplicate that with other taxon." And the feedback we started getting as a global conservation community was this is too confusing. I have this, rat nest of important sites for caribou and muskox and long-billed curlew, and it's too much to take in. And so those same partners who started IBAs globally, so WWF, BirdLife International, Birds Canada, WCS, said, well, if this is important to you all, we'll put it under one umbrella. And so came key biodiversity areas. The kind of tagline, bringing all biodiversity under one roof for the first time. So instead of just looking at where you have 1% of Bonaparte skulls and 1% of bald eagles, we kind of expand out into looking at, well, where is there 1% of caribou? Where is there 1% of endangered plants? Where is there 1% of Western bumblebee? And as someone who came to this from the background of birding, it's been really rewarding in that, you know, bald eagle don't love the Chehalis because it's just terrific real estate and they're huge fans of Chilliwack. They love the Chehalis because it is this ecological wonder full of food, full of safe places to spend time, full of large trees to land on, full of places to nest. And through KBAs, we began to be able to paint this much more comprehensive picture so that when we go to governments and advocacy organizations and say, hey, please, please, please hold space for this. We're not just saying it's because of bald eagle. We're saying it's because of the salmon that run through here, and it's because of the plants that are only found here, and it's because you have 3% of the world's caribou here, and so on and so forth. Just paints a much more comprehensive picture. And as a birder, I think it's really deepens the ability to go into that and why are bald eagles here? Why are glaucous winged gulls here? Why are they declining? Is it because of the fish? Is it because there's not enough trees? What's happening? Um, and so with in BC, it began being implemented as a partnership between Birds Canada, WCS Canada, and BC Nature as early as 2019. We had 7 flagship KBAs first announced and are now up to about 259 in Canada. Many, many, many more under consideration. We have 42 in BC, and I think I have the map in here. Here we go. 42 in BC, zooming in a little more just to give a sense of some of those southern ones. All of those orange dots are KBAs that are currently under consideration. So working with experts, botanists, lichenologists, whoever, to make sure we have the right information. Because to get accepted, it has to go through either the global or national KBA committee scientists to say, yeah, you're onto something here. It's not just, oh yeah, Liam thinks this is a rare lichen. And then once that's done, it goes through First Nations engagement. So we reach out to every single nation with territory within 10 kilometers of a proposed KBA site to say, is this something you want to work with us on? Does this align with your stewardship goals? Once a site gets nominated, it includes descriptions for invasive species, conservation threats, stewardship action, which First Nations or Indigenous groups have territory in this area, and allows them to really take ownership of that KBA site and align it with their conservation values. A site I always kind of give that example of, we reached out to Kitasoo up on the Central Coast, said, here's what KBAs are, here's what they're not, and is there a way this would align with what you're doing to support you? And they said, yeah, we're actually, we're trying to get these sites designated as marine protected areas. We think this would be really useful. Can you come on up and prove how important these sites are to birds during the herring spawn? And in return, we'll give you all of our gray whale data, all of our sea lion data, and we'll make these sites as good as they can be. And they've actually just nominated those sites as marine protected areas, citing some of the work we've been doing is, it's important to us for food sovereignty. It's important to us for climate mitigation. It's important to us because this is the place that we teach our kids what it means to live a good life. And it's important to these bird populations. If you don't listen to us, if you damage these sites, we will see declines in surf scudder as far away as Nunavut and Baja California. So, listen to us for X, Y, and Z reason, but listen to us too, because it's going to impact us all if you don't. So I'm going to highlight a couple of these. As you can see, there's quite a few orange dots in your area, sites that are being considered. And we don't have time to go into all of them, but I chose 3 of my favorites here just to give you that rundown. And also to let you know, when these sites do get nominated, they will be coming to Nature Chilliwack, and you all will have an opportunity to weigh in and, change the site description, propose new boundaries, propose new parts of it, propose new stewardship action to be described so that if, later down the road, Nature Chilliwack wants to do a invasive species removal, you can again say, look, it's important because we are locals and we know it's important. And here's this global framework. If you don't listen to us, here's the impact it will have on these endangered species or even just range restricted species. Um, I'll preface my background's in ornithology. I have a huge amount of gratitude to our WCS partners who handle the non-bird side of this and who teach us a lot about some of the species we're about to talk about. So the first site I chose is the Lower Fraser River. It's one of, I think, the most interesting sites I've come to learn about, just again coming to this as more of an ornithologist. And anyone want to take a wild, well, actually, if you squint hard, you can probably find it. Anyone take a guess if you're not looking at the side there, what species the Lower Fraser River is being considered for?
Sturgeons, yeah.
Yeah, sturgeon. There's four subpopulations of sturgeon in BC, the Upper Fraser, Upper Columbia, Upper Kootenay, and Lower Fraser. And the Lower Fraser population is actually by far the healthiest. I'm imagining a lot of people in the room here are going to know a lot more about sturgeon than I do. I always joke these local presentations are kind of funny sometimes because, I come in as guy from Victoria working on KBA program to tell locals about why their backyard is so great. And one of my favorite things about this is the kind of discussions we have and getting to learn from you more about it. If anyone knows how to see a sturgeon without catching one, I would be very keen, for example. But yeah, so there's thought to be about 50,000 declining white sturgeon in the Lower Fraser population. They're threatened by things like bycatch, habitat degradation, catch and release. Just going through the Kasiwik report on them, they had some really interesting facts around. It seems like while the adults are very resilient to things like warming, disturbance events, habitat degradation, the juveniles seem to not be anywhere near as resilient. And so while the adult population seems to be quite stable, the juvenile population is a bit more in question. And obviously, go juveniles, so go adults eventually. They can live up or over 100 years, and it takes them between 11 and 26 years before they can breed. So this is a species that, if something's going wrong, we wouldn't know for quite a while. And very gratefully, there's a lot of organizations involved in sturgeon research on the Lower Fraser. It's a species I'd love to see someday. It's quite cool. I have some friends who've seen them diving, actually just here near Victoria. And again, one of those things that's kind of hard to fathom running into a fish like this in the middle of the ocean. But I think your guys' neck of the woods is a little better for it. Uh, the next site I wanted to bring up is the Nikomin Slough. Again, I shouldn't have put these up on the side here. You all know what I'm about to talk about. Anyone been to Nikomin Slough? Any idea what species?
Yeah.
Nice. So the species that we're looking to nominate this site for is the Pacific population of painted turtle. Anyone seen these around here, out of curiosity?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, we another site that we have already nominated is actually the lake my grandparents live on up in the Sunshine Coast. So I wouldn't say intimately familiar, but definitely see them around quite a bit. This is one of two populations we have in BC, according to Kasiwik, the Pacific Coast population and the Rocky Mountain population. Here on the coast, ours are threatened, whereas in the Rockies, they're just special concern, according to Kasiwik. So we have a bit of a burden here to make sure they turn back the tide of decline. Some of the things that threaten them are habitat destruction, habitat fragmentation. So not just the degradation of the places that they live, but their ability to move between those places. As I'm sure many of you know, habitat connectivity is one of the biggest challenges we face in wildlife conservation. You can have the healthiest population of 100 turtles in one pond that anyone has ever seen, but if they're not able to get to other ponds, exchange genetic material, you're eventually going to end up with very few and no turtles because of things like inbreeding. There was a study in the eastern United States with their painted turtle population that actually found in a single year their populations were seeing 10% mortality rates from roads alone.
Oh.
And actually, I was in a talk earlier today with some of my colleagues out in Ohio about wildlife habitat corridors. And they were saying how they were looking to British Columbia and what we've done in places like the Rockies to specifically address this to create wildlife bridges, wildlife culverts, and break down those barriers so that wildlife can move between them. It's expensive, it's tricky, it's not always intuitive, but it's one of the best things we can do for species like painted turtles to make sure that we have them forever. The other piece that really threatens painted turtles are the introduction of species like red-eared sliders, which can compete with them for nesting areas, compete with them for food, and American bullfrog, which regularly eat their young. So, on that front, anything we can do to both control new invasive species through, things as simple as with plants scraping your boots off before you go to a new hiking spot, but also control the invasive species we already have, has a huge impact for a whole variety of species, one of which being turtle. And the last site I'm going to talk about is actually three different sites. We have I'm reticent to try and pronounce this. I know I don't always get Chehalis right, and these are a little more, but the Achetlitz Creek, Lukakuk Creek, and then the little Chilliwack and Semiholt Creek. How did I do? Those of you who know these,
Good.
terrific. I didn't put the species up on this one, so now you can actually guess. Anyone want to guess what these three sites are being considered for a key biodiversity area?
Red-legged frog.
Nope, not red-legged frog. Little smaller, a little more fishy.
Delicious.
Sailor sucker, you got it. Quick show of hands. I'm really curious. Have any of you seen a sailor sucker before?
Yes.
Yes.
Nice. I'm always so curious. We have a lot of KBAs for these kind of smaller fish. It is, one of the things I think that gets overlooked a lot in biodiversity studies. And some clubs, you come to them with a strange variant of stickleback, and they go, "I've never heard of this before." And some clubs you bring it to, and they go, "Oh yeah, we're the leading experts of the world in sailor sucker," and it's always super fun. So pat yourselves on the back. You know what it is. Um, so these sailor sucker are listed as endangered by Kosiwick, declining quite rapidly, and are threatened by things like pollution, reduced stream flow, and most notably, decreased oxygen content in the water from increasing water temperatures and nutrient loading. So runoff from farms creating algal blooms that drive down oxygen and kind of drive them out. They are a genetically distinct dwarf form of long-nosed sucker, so catastomus, that isn't officially recognized yet as a subspecies or species, though there's some signaling from Kasiwick that they might be going that way. And we think, survived the continental glaciation event by remaining in ice-free glacial refugias in Washington and then spreading out once the glaciers receded. So a lot of glacier talk today. And they prove a really interesting sort of evolutionary point of how species are able to do that, how they adapt to things like glacial refugia, how they adapt to surviving through periods like that, how other species could adapt, as well as population bottlenecks. So, how small can a population get before it's really driven over the edge, and how do they bounce back? I love anything that gets dwarf. I find species that are able to just get smaller like that uniquely interesting. And the other thing I found about them that I found really interesting is that well, they live about 5 years, and the average female contains about 3,000 eggs. And one thing that makes them pretty different from most fish is that they're actually able to spawn twice a year by maturing only one ovary at a time, which I couldn't find many other fish that do that. I would love to know if anyone here is an ichthyologist and has more background, if that's more common than I knew. But so they can bounce back when given space to do so. But despite that, over the past decade, we think they've declined about 34 to 46% in Canada. They are still holding on in Washington. They're still holding on here, and there is hope, but it's obviously quite concerning. The sort of largest decline was thought to be in the early 20th century with the draining of Sumas Lake, and both pocketing these populations off and reducing their ability to move between some of these sloughs and rivers. And yeah, this is the point where if I was there in person, I'd buy some of you a beer and you'd tell me a bit more about them. But hopefully I can take a rain check on that till the next time I'm in town. And yeah, so that's kind of just a couple of the KBAs in your area. Like I said, I think we have close to 200 being considered in BC, many of which are still coming down the pipeline. And I hope some of you in the room here will be able to give us feedback on once they're ready for nomination. But the key takeaways from this is that, through KBAs, we really point out biodiversity is everywhere. I think sometimes you don't live in the Great Bear Rainforest or something like that. You can think, oh, it's a problem for Chinese bamboo forests or the high Arctic or whatever. But no, we all have a responsibility to make space for these species and prevent them from disappearing. I've been really proud working for BC Nature to see just how much community scientists, passionate naturalist club members can play a role in preventing those extinctions and understanding what's causing them, how quickly species are declining, what can be done, removing invasive species. I was just in a meeting last week with some folks from the Vancouver Island Marmot Foundation and found out that it was a BC Nature Club who was the first one to say, hey, marmots are disappearing like wildfire. We got to do something right now. And the government said, oh, I'm not really sure about that. Is that true? And it was because the club held them to task and said, no, you do your research right now because we are not seeing these. And if we don't do something quick, this is going to go extinct. And they were totally right. And they saved it just in time. So, another one of those good news stories. And, and yeah, so thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for being a good audience. Like I said, I wish I was there to kind of meet up with you all and hear more about this in person, but hopefully through Q&A, we can get into a bit of that. And yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Liam. That's excellent.
Question.
Are there any
Yeah.
more questions? I won't stand there where I
Yes.
block everybody. There's a question here from Bona. Yes, go ahead.
What is the dot at the bottom of Harrison Lake on your map?
Let's get into it. I'm going to share screen again. Dot at the bottom of Harrison Lake on my map. That might be the dot for the Lower Fraser, but here, let me pull up I'm going to show you all a map that doesn't get shared publicly because we don't want to jump the gun, especially with First Nations, on making them think we're not engaging them. So I ask anyone viewing this to not take photos or share any of this publicly, but we're trusting you because you're BC Nature members. That is Miami Creek draft boundary. Let me pull this up. Another Salish sucker site.
Yeah, because I worked with the Miami River Stream Keepers and I've seen Salish suckers in the Miami. Mike Pearson, who wrote the recovery plan for the Salish sucker, he does a lot of trapping in the Miami and we trap them quite often. So there's a lot of, but the Miami is a river that isn't in great shape. We look at it, but yeah, that would be for the Salish sucker on the Miami River. Miami, it's gazetted as a creek, but locally it's known as the Miami River. Any more questions?
Yeah, I was wondering about the Morris Valley, if there's anything up there with the spotted frogs in that area.
Nice. I believe so. I know there's a couple frogs. Pardon me?
Or if there's Salish sucker as well up there.
Yeah, so remind me which valley that is.
The Morris, it's out of Harrison.
Just,
You had a dot on the west side of Harrison Lake.
yeah, it's just up by the Chehalis estuary
Yeah.
where the IBA is. But
So
it's
the big
beyond
one
that.
here?
Yeah,
That's Harrison Lake.
Okay.
Go up to that. Down. There was a dot there somewhere.
Let me see. One of the dots in here? Here, which one is it?
To the left.
To the left, they're
Up,
not
up,
probably
Up
up.
one, up one.
sorry.
So Weaver Lake?
Okay.
Oh, that's Weaver.
That's
I don't have
no,
information on Weaver. I'm not sure about that. I'll send an email back.
Weaver is up that valley, but it's farther up.
So there is, in other words.
And what was the species? What was the species you were thinking of for there?
The spotted frog is in there. There's they are in a protected area, but the bullfrog has moved in. But it's there. There's Morris Creek, and then Morris Lake, and it's off of Harrison River, and so it's a good chance that there would be a Salish sucker in there because it's a right kind of habitat.
Okay, cool.
I've done a lot of surveys. And that's my area. I'm the coordinator for the Christmas bird count for the Harrison River count,
Nice.
and also the Chilliwack as well. But that encompasses that area, and I count up in there. And I've done lots of work with the spotted frog, and and, well, Phantom Market, all sorts of stuff.
And the Fraser Valley Conservancy does a lot of work with the Oregon spotted frog up there in the Morris Valley. I've been up on forays up there,
Okay.
teaching workshops and things like that.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the type of input we're hoping to get out of these workshops. We don't always, especially if it's not mapped by the BC Data Conservation or Center for Data Conservation. One of the best outcomes from these is hearing from you folks where you think should be designated. If I'll put my email here, or if it can be shared after this, if you want to reach out, I would love to put you in touch with the WCS folks who are handling frog and fish concerns, and yeah, figure out if we can get nominated. I know the Upper Chilliwack watershed. I believe Spotted Frog was on there. Now, where is Spotted Frog? I'll ask them where they're at with Spotted Frog because I know there was some discussion about it. I know Giant Salamander got in for Upper Chilliwack once we're ready to nominate.
Right in that area, Connor Creek also runs in there, and that is just an incredible area.
Nice.
And lots of Caucasoan gulls too in the winter.
I've seen your CBC data. It's pretty impressive. Any other questions? Oh, see one hand.
Yeah, hi there. I was wondering, are IBAs being replaced by KBAs, or are we going to keep IBAs and as well have the KBAs?
Yeah, so it's a global program, so we kind of take our cue from BirdLife International. They've told us that KBAs are sort of the next step of IBAs, so we're not going to like remove IBAs, but they're definitely putting the resources now into designating KBAs, including making sure that all our IBAs that are still relevant, aka haven't lost their populations, become designated as KBAs.
Thank you.
But frankly, it'd be great if they were a little more clear because we're also here like, hey, we've done a lot of work on this. Can you give us a little more clarity here?
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question from Fernando at the back there. Go ahead, Fernando.
Yeah,
He's catching up on the screen.
Oh, it lost the sound.
Nope.
no, it's catching up.
It's catching.
Oh,
It
There.
froze.
I can still hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can hear you fine, but our screen keeps freezing now.
Oh, odd. Your screen and audio are all good for me, so shoot away and hopefully it works out.
The thing with birds is that they are pretty well the most visible part of the biome.
Hmm.
So how much are other disciplines of environmental sciences relying on IDAs to take a look at other components of the biome? Because there wouldn't be birds in there unless the whole biome is improving.
Hmm. I mean, the beauty and the challenge of KBAs is if you can prove that there's 1% of a population there, you can get a KBA. The big challenge for more obscure taxon is often that requires us having an idea of how many there are to begin with. So, for example, we've looked at the underwater seamounts off of Haida Gwaii. Fascinating ecosystem. A whole bunch of archaebacteria down there. Millions and millions of skate go there to nest in the hot waters coming off the thermal vents. And we answer that question of, okay, well, how many archaebacteria are there around the world? How many, is this a totally unique skate nesting site, or are all underwater seamounts like this and just nobody's visited the others? Because, we're lucky. Ours is, I think 30 kilometers, give or take, off the coast of Haida Gwaii, which, already very hard place to get to. But you start talking about some of the what are they called? The Jesuit seamounts that are literally directly between us and the Aleutian chain. Nobody has been out there. Nobody has put a camera down there. And so it's that challenge of, do we say this is globally significant, or is this one of 1,000 like it? And like luckily with birds, like you say, they fly in your face, they sing, they call, they're quite large, and there's a ton of nerds such as myself who are willing to go count them. Quite a bit more difficult when you start getting into the small fish and the lichens and that. Though we do still have quite a few sites for lichens. The lichenologists have really come through for us. But I guess maybe to end on that, it's always an evolving process. we have sites earmarked where we say, look, we just don't have enough information on the species. We were pursuing the Fraser River Estuary. One of the sites we wanted to add for that was Georgia Basin bog spider, which is the spider we thought was endemic to the Georgia Basin. And then partway through that, a bunch of people who study spiders, found them way up in Anchorage. And we all went, oh, well, I guess that's not endemic to here. Has anyone looked for these between Anchorage and us? I find it hard to believe there's just the one up there. And so we put that on the back burner and said, look, we'll come back to this. But until someone figures this out, we don't want to falsely say we have 30% or whatever it was of the world's Georgia Basin bog spider, if the reality is nobody's looked for those in the vast majority of the Central Coast. That answer your question?
More questions? Well, it doesn't look like there are. No?
Just one question.
Scott has another question. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Scott.
how useful are online tools like eBird and iNaturalist for determining like new areas or confirming areas of importance?
Hugely useful. Like I said, if I always say, especially with the IBA program, if you went out to collect the data that we and the network of BC Nature Naturalist Clubs collect on a yearly basis as contractors, it would cost you somewhere in the range of the like tens of millions to run those surveys. Like imagine getting 100 contractors together to fan out over Douglas Lake Plateau to count every pond and grassland area for cranes. That would be a monumental survey for a single year, much less doing it every year for 20 years. Uh, Platforms like eBird, it's one of the first places we look. Platforms like iNat, it's one of the ways we get people excited to help us look. I'm not going to say for phantom orchid because obviously there's quite a few poaching concerns with that, and they, as you all know, they do obscure exact locations for phantom orchid. But especially a lot of the rare lichens, something as simple as putting out on iNat Canada, hey, we have a lot of questions about this flower. If you are a hiker, if you are up in the mountains, if you happen to be anywhere near here and you see something like this, just put a photo up, even if you don't know. Then, the global mountain fairy slipper expert of all time will weigh in and figure out if that's what it was. It really democratizes conservation in my view. So hugely helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another question back there? I heard somebody asking something. Well, I guess then in that case, I'll just say thank you very much. We really appreciated having you this evening. We tried many times to get you here and finally we were successful. Most interesting talk. I was just surprised with all the dots on the map and everything that's being considered. So we'll certainly ask our membership to, if they see things and think of things, so we'll get in contact with you. And is your email just Liam at BC Nature or IBA coordinator at BC Nature? How do we get hold of you?
IBA@bcnature.ca, or you can contact the BC Nature office. Any combination thereof, it'll get to me. And
So at BC Nature, not at BCN, bcnature.ca.
exactly. All right.